Hello, thought I'd do a quick video on acid washing a blade. I know there's a few out there already, but I had this Mikami EK3R. Didn't really like it as stock. There's lots of things I wanted to change. I'm currently polishing the scales, doing the backspring, what have you. But with the blade I wanted to add a forward finger choil. It's probably not the best in the world, but it's my first go at it and it will serve its purpose. So I've cut this out here, so that there's something, so I'm not touching the blade when I choke up on the knife, and also it gives me a bit of resistance to stop it closing because there is no half stop on the EK3R. All I've done to this is just give it a quick polish with Auto Sol and the Dremel, which helps remove some of the original stonewash finish. I don't think it matters. I've done a few of these now if it's, it's not even in terms of the finish at the moment. The most important thing to start off with is that it's clean, because any dirt or imperfections on the surface of the knife, when you put it in the ferric chloride to acid wash it, it will react, so you won't get an even finish. I'm using isopropanol alcohol for the job. You could use something like nail varnish remover, acetone, whatever you like. So you'll need something like that to degrease it, to clean it, and some kind of clean pads. I would recommend something like this because you can use it, throw that one away and get another one. If you're using a cloth, there's always a chance that there'll be a bit left on. You'll need a pair of gloves because obviously once it's cleaned, you can't touch the blade. The oils in your hand will react when it comes to acid washing it. I'd already given this a quick clean. Just give it another wipe down with the alcohol, and then what you will need after that is some nail varnish. Nice colour. I don't wear this myself, but you need it to be a bright colour so that when you've done the acid washing you can see where all the nail varnish is, and then you remove that. The purpose of the nail varnish, you put it over where the washers will sit, any contact points when the knife is closed, so all around here where it's going to contact and where the washers are, and that will stop the acid etching that particular part. So I tend to leave the acid etching overnight just to let it harden fully before I do anything else to it, and then you just remove the nail varnish with acetone nail varnish remover, and it's job done. But you do need to be very careful because wherever you paint it, obviously you won't get the finish on the blade, and you have to take into account when the knife pivots in the scales, you will see extra bits of the metal. So one common mistake would be that you overpaint here, and then when you close the knife you get this big line where it's the old finish underneath. So double check. If needs be, put it up against the scales and move it. The first one I did, I drew a pencil line so I knew where to go up to, but just be careful with that. So clean it thoroughly. This is probably the most important part. That will dictate how good the finish is. And then the next step will be putting some nail varnish on the parts I don't want covering. As if by magic, there it is. So I've put plenty of nail varnish on the parts that I don't want to be covered with the etch. That looks okay to me. Yeah, it doesn't have to be neat. You're not going to see this part of the knife, hopefully, if you've done it right, but I will double check that once that's dried. Hold it up against the scales and just rotate it to make sure that you can't see any of that. Nail varnish. One thing, top tip, you will find very useful while you're doing things like this, while this needs to dry, is get a box of some description. Originally I used an old cheap knife box. Gaviscon box will do the trick. Cut a slit in it and it makes a very handy holder. You don't have to set it up against anything while part of it is drying. I found that very useful. So I'll let that dry, and then I will come back and check it in the scales. Okay, right, I've given that 10 minutes or so. It should be pretty much dry. It's a little bit tacky, but It's dry enough for this purpose. And then I am just going to double check by holding it up to the scales that none of that is going to show. So I'm pretty happy with that. That's fine. It's about the same the other side. Let's just double check. Looks pretty good to me. So we're not going to have some horrible line where there's no finish on the blade. So that's the next step. Then what I will do is give it another quick clean. And the next things that you are going to need is some kind of cordage, doesn't matter what it is, and something like a pencil, pen, thin paintbrush, or something to hang it from, because you are going to hang it in the ferric chloride solution. So I'm not going to go over the nail varnish with this alcohol. I don't know whether it will melt it or not, but I just want to give it a final clean in case there's any oil or anything from the box. I just poked it in there. And then you will thread your cordage, get the right end, easier said than done. Thread your cordage through the hole, tie a knot so that about here, so that you've just got a little loop that you can shove your pencil or pen or something through, and you can hang it in your container of ferric chloride. So I have a container of ferric chloride here. I'll leave it on the bag because it does tend to make a mess, and be careful with this stuff. It stains if you get it on carpets, clothes, hands, skin, whatever, it stains. But this is about 50-50. You don't need it that concentrated. Most places that I see recommend 1/3 ferric chloride, 2/3 water. They usually come in a huge bottle, and this stuff, once you've mixed it up and put it in a container, be careful what container you put it in. Glass works well. You don't want to put it in metal, obviously. It will last for months and months. So you can put the lid back on, shove this in a cupboard, and when you need to do another one, it will still be fine. It works the same. So those large bottles of ferric chloride will last me for years, I would have thought. Anyway, I will tie a knot in this, and it will be ready to submerge in the solution. So I'll bring you back in 1 minute. Okay. Right, so the knot is tied. It's just a simple loop that it's hanging from. Take your stick, pencil, pen, whatever, put it through the loop, and you will just hang it in the solution. Like that. Try not to use something too short. I've done it loads of times where you pull it out, it slips off the stick and disappears to the bottom of the solution. You then have to empty the whole thing out to try and fish it out. So it's a waste of your ferric chloride, it's a waste of your solution, and it's really annoying and really messy. How long you leave this depends on what kind of finish you want. For a very light finish, obviously lesser time, may only take 5-10 minutes, something like that. For darker finish, obviously leave it in there longer. Keep checking it every couple of minutes just to see how it's going, because some steels will etch faster than others. It tends to be the softer steel, stuff like HCR13 or carbon steels will etch very quickly. Some of the super steels will take perhaps 2-3 times as long. So it really depends on your personal preference, what type of steel you're working with, as to how long you leave it in there. But you keep checking it every couple of minutes. You won't leave it in there too long like I did the first time I did it. I also did it without diluting it. So we will leave that in there for a few minutes, and then I will take it out and show you the results. That's about 10 minutes, and if I pull this out, you can see it's got a yellow tint because the stuff is yellow. It looks very, very dark. I mean, I wanted this blade dark, but bear in mind, you have to go and wash this with something to stop the reaction. And when you wash it, you'll find that the surface is covered with a kind of slime, which is very dark. Once you clean it and wash it off, it tends to look a bit lighter. So I'll go and clean this blade off and I'll show you what it looks like afterwards. Okay, so I've just washed this one off, dried it. You can see it's kind of two-tone at the moment. That's just where it's drying. That part at the bottom of the blade is closer to the true colour it will be as all that dries, which is perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. It's dark enough, but you can still see the D2 symbol. You can still see the Mekami symbol, which is great. Sometimes if you overdo it, you lose all of that writing that's on the blade. That's something to be mindful of. So I will let this dry. I will probably let it dry at least for a few hours. Quite often I just leave it overnight. Wherever you touch the blade, it will go dark again as it's drying. And then you can leave it as that. That is acid etched. Lots of companies do that on a commercial scale, or you could stonewash it afterwards. I do that by using a different jar, about a third full of stones, bit of washing up liquid, bit of water, chuck the blade in, shake it for a few minutes, and you get that stonewash finish. Bearing in mind, you'll probably need to resharpen it after this anyway, because you've just acid etched the edge, but if you stonewash it, you certainly will. With this one, I think I'm going to do something similar to what I did with the little pry bars. I'm going to wait for it to dry, and then I'm going to rub it down with 2500 grit sandpaper. If that exposes any edges, I might dip it again in the solution, rub it down again to get that hand rubbed custom look, and then I will probably stonewash it afterwards. But we'll see how it turns out. I will end. So the next day now, I have acid washed and then rubbed the blade down with 2500 grit paper. Gives a really nice finish. Kind of takes the acid etch off the high spots. Super smooth. And then I've given it a coat of oil. You've got to keep in mind it will look lighter than you want it. When you put oil on, it goes darker again. So I wanted a dark acid etch on this one. I etched it, rubbed it down, stuck it in for another couple of minutes, let it dry, rubbed it down, stuck it in for another couple of minutes. This was actually etched 3 times, but you can still just see the writing on the blade, although I've done it quite dark. That's actually a really nice finish as it is. I'm tempted just to leave it like that because it looks super cool. Not like any production knife that I've seen, but I think it's going to get scratched and stuff as it gets used, so it's probably better. I think I've decided I'm going to stonewash it as well. So if you're going to do stonewashing after you've etched it, make sure that you top up any points where your nail varnish is thin. It wants to be nice and thick on all of those contact points, because when you shake it in a jar full of rocks, you don't want to start pitting the area around the pivot or on any of this area, because then you're really going to be in trouble. If you can't reprofile it, that's it, it's done, you can't go back. To do stonewashing, I use a jar, stones out of the garden, it's about half full, little bit of water, little bit of washing up liquid, and you literally, just stab myself, you literally drop it in the jar and shake it. Shake it for a minute or two, take it out, check it, see how much pattern you've got on the blade, and then you can always put it back in. Better to take it out every couple of minutes, which is a bit of a pain, than to do it for too long, because obviously you can't put back without taking all this finish off and starting again with the etch. But I'm really pleased with that. The first etch that I did had the liquid too concentrated. It kind of came out looking like stone. But that hand rubbed acid etch looks very cool. I like that. If the stone washing doesn't look right, I've always got the option of taking it all off and etching it again, but we'll see. Through the magic of YouTube, I will come back once I've done it. Okay, so that's the stone washing done. It's about as far as I want to take it. It's looking pretty cool. You can see the effect that the stone washing has on the finish. It's not like the stone wash that you get on mass manufactured blades, which is kind of like a shiny coating. It's a heavy stone wash, deep. It's a dark acid wash, quite a heavy stone wash as well. I think that's looking really cool. So the only thing left to do on this now is to take the nail varnish off with some nail varnish remover, and then it will be ready to sharpen. And I'm going to put a mirror edge on there. I've also, on this knife, because I didn't really like it the way it was, polished up all the scales. These looking cool, putting fingerprints over them. These were dull and pitted. Now you can see yourself in them when you wipe them clean. Very shiny. That's going to look cool. And also, I also acid washed the back spring and then ground in a pattern so the shiny parts show through, but the top is dark acid wash. Didn't do a brilliant job of it. The pattern is not even all the way along. It starts where it's much closer together and it kind of widens out at the end, but it's going to add a bit of detail to the knife. I think that's gonna look quite cool. Not to mention I also put this choil in, which you didn't have originally. There is no half stop on this knife. It's dead easy to cut yourself. Looking at this choil now, I think it should have gone a bit higher on this back part, but I don't think you'll really notice. It won't bother me anyway. As a first attempt, it's not bad. I think if all this goes together well, can't talk today, this is going to be a much nicer knife than the one that I had. I hope that was of use to somebody to see how I go about acid washing and acid etching and stone washing a blade. It's dead easy to do with a bit of ferric chloride and a few extra bits. I'm by no means an expert, but I thought this might be useful. I hope that's of use. Ta-ta.